There's a version of this story where Morab Dvalishvili becomes champion 2, maybe 3 years earlier than he did, where he takes the shortcut, cashes in on the opportunity sitting right in front of him. Nobody would have blamed him for it. But that's not who Morab is. And honestly, that's exactly what makes this story worth telling. Before any of the titles, before the records, before the sold-out arenas, there was a village in the country of Georgia. A small country that most of the world only pays attention to when Russia decides to remind it who the bigger neighbor is. Morab grew up in that tension. He was 17 years old when Russian bombs were falling on the capital city. He watched family members die. Friends too. The electricity went out. The gas ran out. And when a country collapses like that, the men who fill the vacuum aren't exactly the kind of men you want your kids looking up to. Crime ran the streets. And Morab, by his own admission, wasn't entirely sure which path he was going to take. But his parents worked. They showed him what hard work looked like every single day. And somewhere in that chaos, 6-year-old kid walked into a judo gym and decided he was going to become an Olympic champion. He trained judo for years, then sambo, then in 2010, mixed martial arts. By the time he was done competing in Georgia, he had racked up 10 fights, 10 wins, and he was proud of every single one of them. Then he moved to America in 2012, walked into a promoter's office, and was told that none of those fights counted. Every single one had been classified as amateur. His entire record, his entire foundation, wiped clean. He was starting from zero. In a country where he didn't speak the language, alone in New York City, with nothing. What made it worse is that the first promoter willing to book him fights didn't even book him for MMA. He put Morab in boxing matches. 4 of them. Then to kickboxing fights. Morab won them all because Morab doesn't really know how to lose a fight he's healthy for. But boxing wasn't the plan. Boxing was never the plan. He was burning time, wasting months of his career in a sport he didn't want to make a living in, just to stay active and keep himself fed. Because while all of this was happening, Morab was working construction full-time. Framing, roofing, windows, doors, floors. He'd finish a shift, go train, sleep, and do it again. This wasn't the UFC pipeline. This was survival. When he finally got his first real pro MMA fight, it didn't go the way he hoped. He lost a close fight against a more experienced opponent, but a loss is a loss. And for someone who had uprooted his entire life, left his family, his language, his country, to come here and build something that stung in a way that's hard to describe, he bounced back 8 months later, got a win. But then, less than 2 months after that, he took a fight on short notice that he wasn't ready for. Lost again. And for the first time since he stepped off the plane, Morab genuinely considered walking away. He was thousands of miles from home, working in construction. 0-4-2 in his new country, and wondering out loud if he was even good enough to make it. Not just to the UFC, to anything. But then he found Serrafian-Longo, and everything changed. Matt Serra and Ray Longo have built some of the most durable fighters in MMA history. Fighters who don't quit, don't panic, don't fold when things get hard. It's the kind of gym where the culture is as important as the technique. And from the moment Morab walked through that door, he felt it. He'd been an immigrant in New York City for over a year at that point, floating, grinding, isolated. But the Serrafian-Longo team felt like a family. He stopped missing Georgia so much. He had something to fight for again. And then he met Aljamain Sterling. Sterling came over to spar Morab one day. Morab had already done 3 rounds of sparring before Aljo even arrived. And within 10 minutes, Aljo had taken him down, controlled him, and choked him out 3 times. Morab's reaction wasn't bitterness or embarrassment. It was awe. He looked at Sterling and thought, I have so much work to do. That's the kind of competitive hunger that separates good fighters from great ones. The ability to see someone better than you and get motivated, instead of demoralized. From that moment on, the two of them were inseparable. 2 immigrants from opposite ends of the world, both with something to prove, both with chip-on-the-shoulder energy that never fully went away, no matter how successful they became. Aljo's parents came from Jamaica. Morab came from Georgia. They were both outsiders in a sport and a country that wasn't built for them. And they found each other. The wins started coming. A 5-fight streak, and more. Morab became the Ring of Combat Bantamweight champion. And it was during his first title defense that Dana White happened to be in the building, scouting a different fighter. What Dana saw instead was Morab land, a spinning back fist that sent his opponent into another dimension. The crowd went insane. Morab broke into his traditional Georgian dance in the middle of the cage, and Dana White signed him on the spot. The construction worker from Georgia was going to the UFC. His first UFC fight should have been a win. He was sick, full-blown flu, and he refused to pull out because he didn't want to lose the opportunity. He pushed through it, won large portions of the fight, and then lost a split decision that his own coaches called a robbery. It stung. But what came next was somehow even more maddening. His second fight was against Ricky Simon, and in that fight, Koa was winning. Clearly winning. He dropped Simon, was controlling the fight, was minutes away from a win that could have reset his career trajectory entirely. Then, with about a minute left, he shot for a takedown, slipped, and cracked his own head against the mat. He knocked himself out. Not completely, his eyes were still open, his legs were kicking, but his corner, his coaches, and just about everyone watching knew he was gone. The referee didn't stop it. The fight went to the final bell. Morab, barely conscious, somehow survived. And then they gave the fight to Simon on the scorecards. Because on the scorecards, Morab had been losing the fight before he turned it around. And since the referee never stepped in, all of that counted against him. The doctor who came in afterwards said the first thing Morab asked was, "What happened?" He had no idea where he was. He was that far gone. And yet, by the rules, he'd lost a decision. He was now 0-2 in the UFC. If he lost one more fight, he was almost certainly going to be cut. And on top of all of that, because the universe apparently wasn't done testing him, he got a Fight of the Night bonus for his performance. Pocketed the $60,000. Went to Georgia to celebrate, gave money to his brothers, gave his coaches their bonuses, bought a car, took a vacation, and then came home to discover that he owed a significant chunk of it in taxes. Taxes he didn't know existed. He had never made that kind of money in his life. Nobody had told him how it worked. So he went back to construction. The machine was back on the job site. His next fight, in Moscow of all places, was the turning point. With his back completely against the wall, Morab went out there and dominated. 2 rounds, complete control, the kind of performance that tells a division to start paying attention, and then he just kept going. Win after win. He didn't chase the finish. He made a calculated decision after the Ricky Simon disaster. Stop trying to get the stoppage. Take people down, grind them, break them, and let the judges have no choice. It wasn't the most exciting game plan on paper, but in execution, it became something terrifying. His cardio was otherworldly. Other fighters would gas out around round 3. Morab would get stronger. Coaches started calling it a superpower, an unfair advantage dressed up as discipline. He set the record for takedowns in bantamweight history. He quit construction after his 7th UFC fight. The dream, the actual dream, was finally real. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, while Morab was climbing the rankings, Aljamain Sterling was on a parallel track heading straight for the top. They were both in the same weight class, both closing in on the title. And everybody watching started doing the math. When a reporter asked Morab early on, what would happen if they both ended up in a position where they had to fight each other, Morab didn't hesitate. He said they were never going to fight. Didn't make sense. Aljo was his brother. Then he paused and added with a completely straight face that Aljo would beat him anyway, so there was no point. The room laughed. But he meant it. Then Aljo beat Petr Yan for the title. Not cleanly, Yan landed an illegal knee on a downed Sterling, couldn't continue, and was disqualified. Aljo was officially the UFC bantamweight champion under circumstances that divided the entire MMA world. Half the fans were furious. The other half thought Yan deserved exactly what he got for being reckless. And Morab? He was just happy for his friend. Regardless of how it happened, Aljo was champion. And as far as Morab was concerned, that meant the title wasn't available to him. He wasn't going to ask for it. He wasn't going to pressure his friend. He was going to keep winning and wait. The UFC was not pleased about this. At one point, Dana White essentially told Morab that if he wasn't willing to find out who the best fighter in the world was, then this wasn't the place for him. Other voices in the sport piled on. Why would you get into fighting if you don't want the biggest fight? What kind of competitor refuses a title shot? There were real conversations about whether Morab was wasting his career, whether the friendship was costing him something he could never get back, and all of that pressure, all of that criticism, Morab absorbed it, nodded, and kept training with Aljo every single day. He beat Jose Aldo, a former featherweight champion with the most title defenses in that division's history. Morab pressured him for 5 rounds, wore him down, and won decisively. And after the fight, when reporters asked if he now wanted the title shot, he gave the same answer he always gave. Aljo was champion. Aljo was his brother. He wasn't going there. Then came Petr Yan, and this one was personal. Morab does not dislike many people. He is, by almost every account, one of the warmest, most genuinely likable human beings in combat sports. But Petr Yan was the exception. Yan had called Morab a zero to his face, had talked down to him in a hotel lobby, looked at him like he was beneath him, had disrespected Sterling, who was Morab's brother. And beyond all of that personal history, there was something deeper. Yan was Russian. And for a Georgian man who grew up watching Russian bombs fall on his capital city, would family members die in that conflict, this was more than a fight. This was a statement. Morab told his coach before fight week that he had 2 choices, win or not come back. He was not going to lose to a Russian, not in front of his country, not in front of the world. He didn't lose. He dominated. He punched, elbowed, took Yan down, controlled him. And by the end of 25 minutes, the former champion had been completely dismantled. Morab pointed at the cameras and asked who was zero now. But the UFC still wouldn't give him the title shot. Aljo had lost the belt to Sean O'Malley. By this point, a stunning knockout that nobody expected, and instead of booking Morab as the immediate challenger, O'Malley defended first against Chito Vera. Morab was asked to fight Henry Cejudo instead, a 2-division champion, Olympic gold medalist in wrestling, the kind of fight that would have been a main event under any other circumstances. And Morab made it look like a sparring session. At one point, he picked Cejudo up off the mat, carried him across the cage on his shoulders, and deposited him near the front row where Mark Zuckerberg was sitting. He later admitted he got distracted looking at Zuckerberg and almost lost the choke. He also admitted he kissed Cejudo's back at some point during the fight, just to enjoy the moment. Finally, the path was clear. O'Malley was champion. Morab was the undisputed #1 contender. They booked it for UFC 36 at the Sphere in Las Vegas, one of the most visually spectacular events in UFC history. And Morab walked in as the underdog with O'Malley favored. With most analysts picking the champion based on his length, his power, his ability to keep the fight standing. For 5 rounds, Morab did what Morab does. He got hit. He got hurt. He got back up. He closed the distance, got the takedowns, controlled the pace, and by the 5th round, he was breaking O'Malley down. The decision was never really in doubt. Morab Dvalishvili was the UFC Bantamweight champion. The first fighter born in Georgia to win a UFC world title, and when he got home, the entire country treated him like a head of state. Chariots, crowds, people reaching out just to touch him, wanting photos, autographs, to say something to him. He stood in the middle of all of it, the same guy he always was, and thought about the kid who used to frame houses in Brooklyn. What followed was the most ambitious title reign in UFC history, at least in terms of activity. Morab wanted to defend the belt 4 times in a single calendar year. No champion had ever done it before. 3 was the record. He wanted 4. He defended against Umar Nurmagomedov first. This one should have been straightforward on paper, but nothing about it was. Morab went into the fight with a staph infection on his leg, 26 stitches, and a short camp. Umar is the cousin of Khabib Nurmagomedov, comes from the same lineage of elite grapplers, and came in as a heavy favorite. The first 2 rounds were rough. Umar was landing clean, keeping Morab at range, winning almost every exchange. But somewhere in round 3, something shifted. Morab started getting to him. He started making it ugly. Started making Umar carry a pace he hadn't been prepared for. By the championship rounds, Umar was wilting and Morab was getting stronger. He broke the all-time UFC takedown record in that fight, surpassing Georgia's St. Pierre. He defended his belt, and he did it with a staph infection and 26 stitches in his leg. The rematch with O'Malley came next. Morab handled it with the same grinding efficiency, same relentless pace, same refusal to let the fight stay standing. 2 defenses down. Then Corey Sandhagen, one of the most technically gifted fighters in the division. A man who'd beaten multiple top 5 opponents and came in with legitimate arguments that his fight IQ was superior. Morab attempted 38 takedowns, landed 20. In a 5-round world title fight, he nearly finished Sandhagen in the second round and didn't, which he admitted didn't bother him at all. He was just enjoying himself. The scorecards were unanimous. 3 defenses. The 4th fight of the calendar year was against Petr Yan again. A quick turnaround in December, on short notice, in pursuit of something that had literally never been done before. And this time, it didn't go Morab's way. Yan was sharper, more technical, landed heavier shots. There were moments where Morab was visibly, audibly hurt, screaming from a body kick in a way that didn't sound like theater. He fought hard, he fought brave, but by the end of the night, Yan had done what nobody else had managed to do in a very long time. He took the belt. Morab ended the year in the hospital. Aljo was there with him. He was on the phone with his mother. The Bantamweight GOAT conversation is genuinely complicated. Dominic Cruz built something remarkable. Aljamain Sterling held the belt through chaos and controversy. But when you line up the records, most takedowns, most control time, most wins in a row for the division, the strongest title defense run in the weight class's history, Morab's resume is almost impossible to argue against. And the frustrating part, the part that makes the legacy feel bittersweet even while celebrating it, is that he could have had more. He could have had 6 or 7 defenses if the promotion had given him the shot when he earned it. He could have been champion years earlier if he'd been willing to fight his best friend. But that's also the thing. That's the part that makes Morab's story different from every other story in this sport. He had every reason in the world to take the shortcut. The UFC pressured him. The media questioned him. Fans called him soft, called it bad business, called it the wrong choice, and he just kept saying the same thing. Aljo was his brother. They were never going to fight. End of discussion. He came to America with nothing. No English, no money, no record that counted. He worked construction for years, got robbed by judges twice, knocked himself unconscious in his own fight, came within 1 loss of getting cut from the UFC entirely, and still somehow climbed to the very top of the sport without ever stepping over the one person he cared about most. He got the belt. He got the records. He got to go home to Georgia and be treated like a king. He got to keep his best friend. And the morning after his 3rd title defense, he showed up at Aljamain Sterling's wedding and gave him his fight bonus as a gift. Morab Dvalishvili got everything. He just did it his way. And the reason that matters, the reason it's worth sitting with for a moment, is that it almost never works out that way. Loyalty usually costs you something in this sport. Usually the sport finds a way to make you pay for choosing people over opportunity. But Morab looked all of that in the face, made his choice anyway, and somehow the machine kept running. The question now isn't whether he belongs in the greatest conversation. He's already in it. The question is what he does next. He's still young enough. Still hungry enough. The belt is gone, but the man isn't. And if there's one thing this entire story proves, it's that Morab Dvalishvili has never once needed the circumstances to be in his favor. He just needs to show up. And he always shows up.